6 world-class musicians walked into a bolted ballroom in Chicago. Not one of them walked out. The doors were guarded. The windows were locked from the inside. No secret passages. No signs of struggle. Yet somehow, an entire jazz band of 6 musicians and 12 instruments vanished without a single trace. All that remained in the silent room was the faint, metallic smell of ozone. What happened inside the legendary Onyx Room that day? Nobody knows. And even more disturbing, it's not the only case. Over the next 10 minutes, we'll examine chilling cases of mass disappearances that defy all human logic. Rooms where people walked in but never walked out. In Chicago, 1926, in the basement of the exclusive Onyx Hotel, a private party was in full swing for the city's elite. On stage were the Syncopated Six, a jazz band famous for their frantic, high-energy rhythm. Because of the illegal spirits being served, the Onyx Room was a fortress. There was only one entrance, which was guarded by 2 men who later swore no one left that stage. The windows were high, narrow, and bolted from the inside against the Chicago winter. At 11:15 p.m., the music suddenly stopped. It was as if a needle had been ripped off a record. When the club owner burst through the doors, he was expecting a police raid or a fight happening. But instead he found a room of silent, terrified witnesses. The stage was empty. 6 men had vanished into thin air while performing. Their instruments, all 12 of them, were lying on the floor, some still warm to the touch. There was no blood, no struggle, just a thick, unnatural fog that witnesses described as smelling like metallic lightning. It was the unmistakable scent of ozone. Police tore the Onyx Room apart. They looked through every peeping hole and crevice of the onyx. They searched the floorboards, the vents, and the hotel above. They found nothing. 6 musicians had quite literally evaporated, leaving the instruments of their craft behind as the only evidence that they ever existed. For a century, the Syncopated Six were ghosts, but recently a routine renovation of the old Onyx Hotel foundation uncovered a secret that had been entombed for 100 years. Behind a false wall of reinforced brick, workers found a narrow, hidden chamber. Inside weren't bodies, but the original instruments, the real ones, hidden away while the decoy instruments were left on stage to be found by police. This discovery blew the supernatural theory wide open and replaced it with something arguably more impressive. Theoretical investigators now believe the disappearance was a high-stakes vanishing act designed by a master stage architect. But why? The leading theory points to a massive insurance fraud scheme involving the local jazz age underground. The band was worth more as evaporated legends than as working musicians. By vanishing into the Chicago night, they triggered massive payouts for the club's owners and became the ultimate advertisement for the hotel's secrecy. If the Onyx Room was a masterpiece of human engineering, our next case is a masterpiece of nature's brutality. In 1934, director Julian da Silva led a 12-man expedition into the unexplored Mato Grosso of Brazil. They weren't just explorers, they were a high-tech film crew. They carried a huge amount of equipment with several heavy, hand-cranked cameras and miles of film into a green abyss that had already swallowed dozens of people. It was a high-stakes mission, and it lived true to its name as the coastal outpost received one final radio transmission before they were never heard from again. For 3 years, the world assumed the jungle had simply claimed them, until a search party stumbled upon a rusted film canister and a water-damaged diary. The journal entries was filled with scientific observations, but quickly descended into a feverish paranoia. Da Silva wrote of phantom drum beats that seemed to move with the crew, always staying exactly 50 paces behind them in the dark. By day 40, a collective fever had taken hold. The men began to distrust the very ground they slept on, claiming the trees were repositioning themselves at night to block their exit path. Decades later, 2024 LiDAR scans of their last known coordinates revealed something the crew couldn't have known. There were unnatural geometric structures buried deep beneath the canopy where they were last known to have been. Forensic analysis of the recovered film fragments suggests the crew wasn't just lost. They were tracking a light source in the 1930s jungle that shouldn't have existed, a light that led them deeper into a sacred boundary they were never meant to cross. Local indigenous oral histories still speak of the men who became part of the wood. Whether it was a breakdown of the social order or a fringe theory of temporal displacement, the legacy of the film crew remains buried in the mud, waiting for a new generation to discover what drove the crew into oblivion. On December 1872, far off the coast of the Azores, the crew of the Dei Grazia spotted a ship moving steadily across the waves. Its sails were torn and flapping in the wind. It was the Mary Celeste. When the boarding party stepped onto the deck, they expected a scene of violence. Instead, they found a vessel that was fully operational, yet empty. The ship was largely undamaged, but the last log entry was dated 10 days back, and the main lifeboat was gone. Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and 7 crew members were nowhere to be found. Personal items were left behind as if the crew had left in a hurry. There was no structural damage and no sinking threat to the hull of the ship. Yet, a single frayed tow rope could be seen hanging by the side of the ship, and the only lifeboat was missing. Why would a veteran captain choose a tiny raft over a sturdy brigantine in the middle of the Atlantic? The answer may lie in the 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol held in the cargo bay. Investigators discovered 9 empty, leaking casks. A leading theory suggests that invisible alcoholic fumes created an imminent, perceived threat of explosion. Fueled by the fear of a fire they couldn't see, the crew may have fled in a panic-driven mistake. For over a century, other theories like myths of mutiny, pirate raids, and sea monsters have surrounded the mystery of the Celeste ship. Modern sonar mapping has attempted to trace the final path of that lost lifeboat, but the Atlantic holds its secrets tight. The legacy of the Mary Celeste remains the ultimate maritime mystery test for historians. Some disappearances are defined by what was taken, but this one was defined by what was left behind. We're halfway through the world's most disturbing disappearances. If you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video. Now, let's head to 1915, where an entire British regiment marched into a cloud and never came out the other side. On August 1915, 267 men of the Sandringham Company marched toward a strategic ridge at Suvla Bay. But as they reached the crest, they encountered something that ignored every law of meteorology. There was 6 or 8 loaf-shaped clouds in the area. Witnesses from the New Zealand Field Company later testified that the men walked straight into the fog without hesitation. Moments later, the cloud lifted vertically and drifted away against the wind. The ground where the regiment had just been standing was completely empty. Not a single rifle, helmet, or footprint remained. For years, the British government listed the men as missing in action, assuming they had been captured by Turkish forces. But after the war, Turkey denied ever engaging the unit or taking them prisoner. 267 soldiers had simply ceased to exist in broad daylight. Recent studies and discoveries indicates the battalion was cut off, surrounded, and killed, with their bodies found in 1919 scattered over a wide area, some up to a mile behind the Turkish front line. It was known that the Turkish didn't like taking prisoners and had killed every member of the battalion. Modern perspectives on transient atmospheric phenomena also suggest these men may have walked into a localized magnetic dead zone. That is a physical doorway that opened and closed in the heat of battle. Whether it's a sophisticated technological interference or a tactical ambush by the Turks, these cases prove that sometimes the world doesn't just take people, it erases them. Our final case takes us to a night in 1956. Inside a packed canvas tent, 60 world-class performers were in the middle of a high-energy finale when the power grid failed. For 3 minutes, the audience sat in a heavy, unnatural silence. When the backup generators finally came to life, the crowd didn't cheer. They screamed. The ring was empty. 60 performers had vanished from a high-security perimeter in less than 180 seconds. Costumes were found lying exactly where the performers had last stood. Capes and silk slippers were left behind, as if their owners had simply evaporated out of them. What was more disturbing was the behavior of the animals. Despite the chaos caused by the sudden disappearance of the performers, the lions and elephants remained perfectly calm in their cages, staring silently at the empty center ring. Investigators were confused. Forensic results proved it was physically impossible for 60 people to exit through the restricted, mud-soaked perimeter without leaving a single footprint or being heard by the panicking audience. Dark rumors began to circulate about experimental military technology being tested in the rural region nearby, or perhaps a pre-planned mass defection orchestrated by organized crime networks. Whether it was a masterful illusion or a true historical anomaly, the site of the 1956 circus remains untouched, a silent monument to the night an entire world vanished into the dark. 5 stories. Hundreds of people missing. 0 logical explanations. From the Onyx Room in Chicago to the Circus Troupe disappearance of 1956, we are left with a single, chilling truth. The world we think we know is full of doors we aren't meant to open. You've made it to the end of the video. If you have your own theory on where these people went, leave it in the comments below. I'll be reading all of them.